One day I was driving to a friend's house in the country. It was an ordinary working Friday, and by evening, anticipating the taste of kebab and beer, I was already rushing by car along the highway from the city towards the country house. It was not far, only 80 miles from the city, and I knew the road by heart that I could get there with my eyes closed. It was nothing complicated, almost all the time in a straight line, and only at the end of the road I had to turn towards the village of Grafskoye, and there it was, just a short distance. On this day it was raining with thunderstorm and visibility was bad, so I drove slower than usual. I didn't want to get into an accident today. Halfway down the road I hit a traffic jam. Where could it come from on the highway? After 2 hours of slow driving, I saw the cause of the traffic jam. Road repairs, it's like always. As I drive, it's always an adventure. Road repairs, accidents. Well, we'll have to take a detour. And how fortunate. Just before the barriers that the workers put up, there's an exit to a country road and a sign saying that there's a detour through the village that way. The sign was so old, you couldn't read the name of the village. Oh well, maybe it's not that bad. I'll stay a while longer bypassing the repair work, and then I'll fly full steam ahead to my friends. When leaving the road, I noticed that only I decided to detour. All other cars immediately turned around and drove away towards the city. That's weird. Maybe they know a shorter route? Anyway, I had already turned off onto a dirt road and I didn't feel like turning around. There were no streetlights on this road, of course, and the road was old. And it was obvious that cars rarely passed on it, but it was hard to see, because the rain had washed out the road very badly. I wish I hadn't gotten stuck in this quagmire of earth and clay. It was difficult to drive, especially on my not new car. And then in the distance, the roofs of houses appeared. The time was already past midnight, and the rain only intensified, turning into small hail. Great. This is just what I needed. It was almost impossible to continue on the road in this weather, so I decided to call my friends and tell them that I would arrive in the morning, and that I would try to spend the night in the village, hoping that someone would take me in. I took the phone in my hand. Of course, no signal. It's the 21st century, and if you turn off the main road a few miles outside of town, you're in the Middle Ages. Well, I hope in a drunken frenzy my comrades will not look for me in the middle of the night and just fall asleep. And in the morning I'll come to them already. I arrived at the first houses. Apparently this village consisted of one road with houses on the left and on the right. Speaking of houses, they didn't look very habitable. I didn't see what happened to the other houses, but the first two shocked me a little. To say that they were old was not enough. They were dilapidated, decrepit, overgrown with impenetrable thickets of some bushes. There was no light in any of the windows. It didn't surprise me. It was late, and people were asleep. Though, are there people here at all? Suddenly lightning flashed, and I caught a glimpse of a silhouette on the road. It was tall, I would even say lanky. Its arms seemed longer than a normal person's, and it was dressed in rags. At the moment of enlightenment in the street, after the lightning, it ran towards the house nearest to me. All this happened literally in a matter of moments. I thought maybe because of poor visibility and fatigue I was dreaming, or maybe it was a person fleeing from the hail and running toward his home. I explained to myself, great, so there are people in this God-forsaken place, and I can make arrangements with them for a night's lodging. I didn't feel like getting out of the car. It was raining so hard that even if you stayed outside for 30 seconds you would get soaked to the skin, but there was nowhere to go. Sleeping in the car was not an option at all. It was cool outside, and I didn't want to stand with the engine running and burn fuel, in case I wouldn't make it to the gas station in the morning, I thought. I drove as close as possible to the house where the man ran to. I took my phone and money with me, in case the owners asked me to pay for the night, and, having gathered my strength, I jumped out of the car. I ran toward the front door of the house under the porch. I got soaked. It was instantly cold and dank. Yes, the weather in early October is just something. How does it go? The weather doesn't have bad weather? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. The porch I was under was leaking, but it was better than standing in the pouring rain. I knocked on the door. Masters, anybody home? Silence. I knock again. Nothing happens. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't open. What to do? Running to another house would mean getting wet and very likely getting sick. No, I don't want that. Maybe I should go around the house and there'll be another door. I'll have to check it out. With that plan in mind, I moved along the wall of the house around the corner, glancing fleetingly out the window. For a second, I thought I saw some movement there. Through a thicket of impenetrable bushes, I made my way to the back of the house. There was indeed a door here. It faced the back patio. Without thinking, I ducked inside. I shut the door. The house smelled musty and damp and kind of musty. Well, at least now the rain wouldn't bother me. I picked up my phone and turned on the flashlight, and noticed that the phone had 15% charge left. I started waving the flashlight around the room. A table, a chair, a mug, plates. Okay, I'm in the kitchen. I remembered that I'd barged into the house uninvited and I should at least let the owners know I was here. Masters, will you accept a guest for the night? If anything, I can offer you money for your help. In reply, silence and only the sound of drops on the roof destroyed it. Well, if there is no one here, then maybe I can spend the night unnoticed. And if the owners come, I will explain everything to them in a kind way. Okay, here's the plan. We need to find at least a bed. We can't sleep on the floor. I couldn't find a bed in the kitchen, so I had to get inside the house. The floor creaked loudly under my footsteps. The atmosphere was not good. The night, the old house, the creaky floor. All the horror movies put together came to mind. A chill ran down my spine. I walked through the kitchen and found myself in a small room. There was a huge clock on the wall. You know, the one that beats every hour as many times as it's an hour of time. It looked very old, and the clocks were a bit smoky. Also in this room I could see a table with some rags on it stained with earth or something else. The room was in a terrible state. The wallpaper was crumbling off the walls, the ceiling was smeared with sweat, and the whole room was a ghastly sight, and the floor was smeared with dry mud. There was a sprung bed next to the table. Its headboard was very rusty, suggesting that no one lived in this house at all. No one would sleep on such an old bed. No one but me. Sleep came on unexpectedly. Of course I did. I'd been sleep-deprived for a whole work week. Plus, I'd been on the road for over 5 hours. Yeah, that 80 miles to the country house was a lot longer. Without much ado, realizing that the house was probably abandoned and the owners wouldn't come, I sat down on the bed, not at all afraid that it was about to fall apart and I would collapse to the floor, punching through the rotten boards and fall into the cellar. Well, the bed didn't fall apart. That's a good sign. I closed my eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Somehow the fear had completely disappeared. I woke up to a strange sound. It was as if someone was walking in the kitchen, and the floor creaked under his footsteps. Opening my eyes and trying to figure out what I was doing here, I sat up on the bed and shouted, "Is anyone here?" The footsteps stopped. There was obviously someone in there. I got out of bed and went into the kitchen. There's no one there. I turned on the flashlight on my phone. The floor was covered in fresh dirt. What the hell is that? What's that filthy thing going around at night? And where did it go? The thoughts in my head began to jumble with fear. Turning to leave the kitchen, I saw a tall shadow flicker into the room. I ran in there. The dirt again. It led towards some small hatch in the floor. Why didn't I see it when I came into this room? Well, do I go in there or screw it? I haven't fought any evil yet. I sat down on the bed, thinking about what to do next. I could hardly sleep. I didn't want to run to the car either. I had just dried off, and it was still raining outside. So I had to go and find some adventure for my ass. I found my old Swiss Army knife in my bag. At least I had a weapon. But if it's something otherworldly, it won't help me much. I plucked up the courage to go to the hatch. Shall I open it? No, why would I do that? What if there's something interesting in there? Yeah, like a ghoul or something. That's interesting. Well, you gotta do something. Having finished arguing with myself, I started to open the hatch. Its handle was covered in this very dirt and it smelled so bad that I almost saw my lunch today. It smelled like dead meat. That's out of line. Well, if I'm gonna get dirty in it, I've got to finish the job. The hatch is open. I shined my phone down there. Wooden steps going deep into the darkness and you can't see anything else. Super. Descending into the unknown. I noticed my phone had 5% battery life left. Okay, so I quickly descend, look around, send the baddies to the other side and go to bed. Sounds good. Just as I bent down to start climbing down, I was suddenly pushed from behind by something and I went tumbling down. Silence. Pain in my head. I'm lying on something hard and unpleasant. Feeling with my fingers, I realized that it was something porous and hard. Bone, it's bone. Instantly jumping up and shining my flashlight around me, I found that the entire basement floor was covered with bones. I just went numb with fear. Where did I go? Who pushed me? How do I get out of here? While my thoughts were sluggishly digesting after the blow to my head, something stirred in the corner. Something was sitting there, eating, judging by the slurping sounds. Suddenly, the sound stopped and it began to slowly rise. Dry long legs, the arms were below the knees, and the hands had sickle-shaped fingers or claws. I couldn't make out the head. It had a very toothy head. It looked like an elongated, nibbled skull. There were no eyes, or I just didn't see them. The ghoul lunged at me with a heartbreaking scream. Dropping my phone, I dodged it and fell. Get up, I mumbled to myself. Instantly, the monster turned around and came at me again. This time I didn't have time to parry, and a razor-sharp claw slashed across my chest. The pain pierced my entire body, and apparently not only mine. The beast, roaring, fell beside me. The Swiss knife was sticking out of its chest. Run, I have to get out of here. I don't have a second knife. I jumped up and started climbing up the stairs, picking up my phone from the floor. Just then I heard that something had gotten to its feet and was already running towards me. With all the strength I had left, I climbed up the very steep stairs, not thinking at all that the ground under my feet and hands was filled with rotting dead meat. Suddenly, I was dragged down by my leg. It was a good thing my shoes had zippers instead of laces. Quickly unzipping it in one movement, the boot stayed with the bastard and it fell down. Opening the hatch, it's already light outside. With a quick movement, I grabbed my purse and with all my might I crashed through the front door. The one that was locked, hoping that I would kick it to hell. Either I didn't weigh enough or I didn't have the strength to accelerate, but the door hit me with a thud and I flew backwards. The deadbolt. There's a deadbolt on the door. I'm blind. I got up quickly, ran to the door, removed the deadbolt, and then I heard a nasty breath behind me. Without looking behind me, I opened the door, ran out of the house and ran to my car. The rain was already over and fog was drifting over the ground. Getting into the car, I instantly yanked the handbrake off and drove off. I looked in the rearview mirror and there, all I could see was an old cemetery and no houses, and there's 5 of these scary creatures standing in the street watching me. I got to the country house after all. When my friends saw me in the morning, they were almost speechless. Dirty, with a bloody cut all over my chest, without a shoe, all disheveled. I told them everything. My friend looked at me in bewilderment and said, "There's no village there. There is only an ancient cemetery, and it appeared after... Wait, there was a village there, but it burned down more than 100 years ago. Everyone who lived there died, and they buried all the inhabitants there, in the place where the village burned down. Yeah, I think we'll take a different road home." We lived apart. Me, Mom and Dad. My mom had an aunt, but she had no husband or children, and was a feminist in general. She lived alone. When I was about 10 years old, she started to get very sick. Her heart was weak in her old age, so she had a lot of heart attacks. Since she was alone, she had no one to help her, so we moved in with her so that at least she could call an ambulance. For about a year, everything was more or less normal. It was a one-room apartment. It was cramped, but we lived. One night, she had a heart attack, a stroke. She was taken to the hospital. The whole left side of her body was paralyzed, and something was wrong with her brain. She was in the hospital for a week, couldn't talk, she peed. Once my dad and I went to check on her, she wrote a fragment of Taras Shevchenko's poem, "Dummy, My Dummy." Mom was frightened. Everyone was nervous. Then they took her home, and she lived for another year. She was crazy. What she was doing was very frightening and simply killed. The atmosphere at home was depressing. November 31st. I was walking outside. It was 8 p.m. somewhere. My mom was at work. My dad was at home. He called me and told me to go home. Everything seemed fine. I got home. He told me to sit with my grandmother because he had to go somewhere for a little while. I was watching TV. My grandmother called out to me. Her voice was surprisingly like it used to be when she was healthy. I walked over, sat on the bed. Her look was normal too, like before. She told me she loved me and smiled, then asked me to get some water. I brought it. She drained the glass and set it on the nightstand next to me. Then she lifted my hand from her knee with her healthy hand and placed it on her stomach. She took a deep breath, but it was obvious she wasn't in pain. She looked up, and her gaze froze, went blank, her eyes glassy. She died. My hand stayed in her hand. I couldn't get up. I couldn't realize what had happened. I sat like that for a long time. Then I came out of this strange state and started crying. I decided to call my mom or dad. I was scared to be alone with her. I got up but sat next to her on a chair and never called her. Dad came in about an hour later. The whole time I just stared at her. I don't remember much of what happened after that. After that, something strange started happening at home. We didn't break tradition and covered all the mirrors. When I was leaving, I went to the toilet, and to comb my hair, I pulled the sheet off the mirror. There was nothing there. I combed my hair and left. In the evening, when I came back, Mom and Dad scolded me for pulling the sheet and not hanging it back up. Grandma lay in the middle of the room on stools in a coffin for 2 or 3 days. And you couldn't open the mirrors. Then there was the funeral. I don't remember much about that either, but about a week after her funeral, I was home alone. I was watching TV, and I fell asleep and dreamt about her. When I woke up, I went to the bathroom. And to go to the bathroom, you have to go through a hallway where there's a big mirror. The hallway is dark. I went to the switch, past the mirror, and something was wrong in the reflection. I turned around, although I was very afraid. Stupid curiosity. I saw my face there, but it wasn't really my face. It was pale gray, so sickly looking and with sunken eyes. It was not me. I was so frightened I ran into the room. I turned the TV on full blast, and I was afraid to look in the mirror. I sat there in complete terror. I was terribly scared. That's where it all started. Now we live in the same apartment, while selling, and for 4 years I got used to the paranormal activity of the mystical world, so fond of returning the dead to their native lands of the period of life. The strange behavior of cats and dogs, the cool breeze so pleasantly caressing the skin, with the blanket being no barrier, footsteps, and so many other strange things. That's what I'm used to. Maybe it's not scary, but it was very scary then, and now I'm used to it. But still, it's all really happening, and I'm just sick of it.